Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome to another cemetery adventure. I am here in Washington, D.C. at the Mount Olivet Cemetery. I came here to film the gravesite of Mary Surratt, and that was a video that I've already put out on this channel in a separate video all by itself. But while it was here, I was using the Find a Grave app to see if there was anybody else interesting buried in this cemetery, and it turns out there were quite a few. So while I can't go to all the famous people buried in this cemetery, I did cherry pick a few of my favorite stories, and I want to show you their final resting places, and bring their stories back to life in a quick video that I hope you will enjoy. Let's go check out a super cool cemetery. Mount Olivet Cemetery is the largest and oldest Catholic cemetery in the metropolitan Washington, D.C. area. First opened for burials in 1958, Mount Olivet consists of 85 acres of well-tended grounds and holds the graves of over 106,000 persons. There are many fascinating people buried here, including 24 famous people as listed on the Find a Grave app, and I have chosen 4 stories that I thought were the most interesting to resurrect for this video. The first grave we are searching for is a man named James Hoban, who incidentally is buried quite close to the final resting place of Mary Surratt. I have already covered Mary Surratt last month in a standalone video if you'd like to find out more about her. In a nutshell, Mary owned and operated the boarding house where John Wilkes Booth and his co-conspirators gathered regularly to plot the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. In 1865, Mary Surratt became the first woman to be executed by the United States government. But today we are searching now for James Hoban, who has a much less graphic and much more interesting life story. James Hoban was born in 1755 in County Kilkenny, Ireland, in a Roman Catholic household of tenant farmers on the estate of the Earl of Desart. Hoban began his profession as a young adult in carpentry and was quickly recognized for his talent. He was awarded a place in the Dublin Society's Darwin School and received the Duke of Leinster's Medal for his 1780 drawings, brackets, stairs, and roofs. From 1779 until 1785, he was an apprentice to Thomas Ivory, who was a well-respected English architect and builder. In 1785, Hoban came to Philadelphia from Ireland and then traveled on to South Carolina. While in South Carolina, Hoban built several buildings, including the Charleston County Courthouse, the William Seabrook House, and the original state capitol building in Columbia, which was unfortunately burned down by General William T. Sherman in 1865. While in South Carolina, Hoban first met George Washington, who was a great admirer of his talents. Washington summoned Hoban back to Philadelphia, which acted as the nation's capital from 1790 until 1800. Washington wanted Hoban to compete for the commission of the new nation's presidential house and capitol building. Hoban proposed a grand design of English Georgian style, which was chosen in July of 1792. Only after following a suggestion from Washington to decrease the scale of the original mansion. The cornerstone was laid in 1793, and work continued until 1801. During the War of 1812, the White House was burned down by the British in 1814. Hoban was summoned by then-President James Monroe to rebuild the south portico and add, in 1829, the north portico. Hoban also assisted the commissioners with the development of the Capitol building from the laying of the cornerstone on September 18, 1793, and directed the work from 1798 until 1902. He designed the Grand Hotel and the Little Hotel, and his last federal commission was the State and War Offices building, which was finished in 1818. Very few of his buildings remain to this day, apart from the White House and the Capitol building, as many were lost through the years to fire or demolished for new construction. The private residence of President Monroe, known as Oak Hill, still stands in Virginia. Hoban was the founder of the Grand Lodge No. 1 of the Masonic Order, a captain of the local militia company, and successful in real estate development. He signed a petition calling for the radical abolition of slavery in the District of Columbia and stipulated that if slaves were to be sold, They must be sold only locally to prevent the separation of families and communities. His estate was valued to be at over $1.5 million in today's 21st century economy. Hoban and his first wife, Susan Sewell, had 10 children together. James Hoban died in 1831 and was originally interred near DuPont Circle in the Holmeads Burial Ground. In 1874, his remains were reinterred at Mount Olivet Cemetery. His grave was neglected and almost lost to obscurity until March 17 of 1921, when several organizations, including the Daughters of the American Revolution, the Ambassador from Ireland, and the White House Historical Association, as well as others, joined together to rescue and restore it. His original marker was restored and a commemorative plaque was placed. This is the final resting place of Mary Surratt. The second gravesite I would like to find belongs to Jan Karski, who was born in June of 1914 in Lutz, Poland, under a different name originally. This story caught my attention after having recently visited the Holocaust Memorial Museums several times and learning about the ghettos that were established to persecute Jewish people in Poland, specifically Lutz. At the time Karski was growing up in Poland, Lutz was a very ethnically and culturally diverse city. After completing his secondary school education, he attended university in Ukraine and graduated in 1935 with a degree in law and diplomatic science. He was required to have compulsory military training during this time, which he fulfilled at a school for mounted artillery officers in the Ukraine. Karski served at various diplomatic posts in Switzerland, Germany, and the United Kingdom before joining Poland's diplomatic service. In January of 1939, he began working in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He served in the artillery after Germany's invasion of Poland in September of 1939, where he was eventually taken prisoner by the Red Army. He was exchanged to the German Army in a POW transfer by concealing his true rank. Karski and the other POWs were taken to the German-controlled area of Poland in November of 1939, but he fled from the train headed to the POW camp and managed to make his way to Warsaw, where he joined the Polish Home Army. He took on the name Jan Karski and later adopted it as his legal name. His primary duty in the Home Army was to act as a courier to the Polish government in exile. During one of these missions, he was arrested and severely tortured by the Gestapo, but he managed to escape from the hospital he was taken to. After recovering, he went back to work in the Information and Propaganda Bureau of the headquarters of the Home Army. In the summer of 1942, the Polish government selected Karski to secretly visit the Polish Prime Minister and other members of the government in exile in London to tell them about the Nazi atrocities taking place in Poland. Karski was smuggled into the Warsaw ghettos several times to collect testimonies and evidence. He also disguised himself as a Ukrainian guard to observe what he believed at the time to be the extermination camp Belzec. Karski presented this evidence to members of the Polish, United States, and British governments in 1942 and 1943, meeting with such leaders as British Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, Rabbi Stephen Wise, Cardinal Samuel Strych, the U.S. Secretary of State Cordell Hull, numerous leaders of Polish political parties, Hollywood moguls, and various media reporters. Karski was one of the most prominent people informing the West about Nazi atrocities and appealing to Western leaders to try to do something to stop them, although most of the people he met with did not believe what he said, believed he was exaggerating, or believed it was propaganda from the Polish government in exile. However, some believe that Karski's testimony may have led President Roosevelt to create the War Refugee Board in January of 1944. Karski wrote a book about his experiences called Story of Secret State in 1944, which became a bestseller for several years. Following the war, Karski settled in the United States, where he studied for his Ph.D. at Georgetown University. After receiving his degree in 1952, he taught international affairs, East European affairs, and comparative government at Georgetown for over 40 years, eventually becoming one of the most celebrated members of the faculty. He became a United States citizen in 1954. He and his wife, Pola, had no children. Karski died at the age of 86. I am unsure yet if that is going to be an abrupt cut or if I'm just going to leave it. A humongous bee just flew straight into my fingers that were holding the camera, so let's keep going. Very interesting stories here, right? Guys, this is really creepy. Look at this Jesus hanging on the cross from the side. I mean, yikes. There are landscapers here today. I always show up to cemeteries on days when landscapers are here, but that makes me feel good. I don't feel completely alone. You may hear the chainsaws in the background. This cemetery seems to have undergone like a hurricane or something because there's a lot of limbs and branches down, and they're here to clean it up today. Now we are headed to look for James Mooney, who was an anthropologist and advocate for Native Americans. James Mooney was born in 1861 in Indiana, the son of Irish Catholic immigrants. He became connected with the Bureau of American Ethnology in Washington, D.C. in 1885, which was his dream career. For his studies, he compiled a tribal list containing 3,000 groups, and he conducted several famous studies across the country. Mooney lived for several years among the Cherokees, studied the ghost dance among the Lakota, and advocated for the Native American Church. His most notable work was his ethnographic study of the ghost dance, a widespread religious movement among various Native American groups that ended in 1890 with a bloody massacre by the United States Army at Wounded Knee, South Dakota. Mooney was a member and past president of the Anthropological Society of Washington, a member of the Mississippi Valley Historical Society, the first president of the Gaelic Society of Washington, and the author of many books and articles dealing with Indian life and lore. The Cheyenne, who had been confined to reservations in Indian Territory, or modern-day Oklahoma, began the Native American Church, a religion with both Christian and traditional Plains Indians elements, and Mooney defended the church as a real religion before Congress. Mooney argued that the Native American Church should be protected under the Freedom of Religion Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, a stance that cost him the only job that he had ever wanted to hold with the Bureau of American Ethnology. Mooney died shortly after his congressional testimony at the age of 60 in 1921, and some said he died of a broken heart. He never compromised doing what he believed was right and just to save either his career or his life. The Southern Anthropological Society's Mooney Award is named after him. The last person we are going to look for is William Van Wyck Riley, who was born in 1853 in Washington, D.C., the son of William and Ellen Riley. Riley's father graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy in 1847 and was lost in the Straits of Formosa off of China while serving on the USS Porpoise in 1854. Riley was appointed to the U.S. Naval Academy in 1870, but he failed 3 examinations and resigned in October of 1872. He participated in a surveying expedition to Nicaragua from December 1872 until July of 1873, and was later employed at the Washington Navy Yard, supervising the dismantling of Monitor-class warships. On October 15, 1875, he obtained a direct appointment as Second Lieutenant, 10th U.S. Cavalry. A few months later, he transferred to the 7th U.S. Cavalry and joined Company E at Fort Lincoln, Dakota Territory on April 17, 1876. 1 month later, he rode from the fort with his regiment to participate in the Sioux campaign. Temporarily assigned to Company F, 7th Cavalry, Riley perished with Lieutenant Colonel George A. Custer's battalion at the Battle of Little Bighorn. His body was found on Last Stand Hill. Originally buried on the field, his remains were recovered the following year. On August 3, 1877, he was reinterred in the Mount Olivet Cemetery here in Washington, D.C. A signet ring that Riley wore at the time of his death was later recovered from an Indian who surrendered at Fort Robinson, Nebraska in April of 1877. The ring is in the collections of the Smithsonian Institute. All right, everybody, it is hot. I am going to end it here. There are lots of people buried here with interesting stories, or if you use the Find a Grave app, the famous people buried here tab. But those were the 4 that I thought were the most interesting to me, and I definitely wanted to see their final resting places, resurrect their stories, tell them, and show you where they are buried. I hope you enjoyed this. I absolutely love going to a cemetery and exploring and learning some new things and learning about some people I had never heard of. So I love sharing these, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'll see you guys another day in another adventure. Bye, guys.